Hey, if you enjoy the topic of software security and configuration management and infrastructure and software, if you're kind of in that world, you're in the right place. You're going to enjoy discussions that I'm having with one of my colleagues who's an expert in this area. So stick around. We're going to talk a little bit about infrastructure scanning and security. So I hope you stay. I think you'll learn something. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from TAG. I'm going to be doing a series of discussions with an expert, a friend of mine, Albert Heinle, who runs CoGuard. This guy knows his stuff when it comes to scanning and software. He's one of the world's experts, and every time I get with him, I feel like I'm learning something new. So, Albert, welcome. Thanks for making time today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It is always a pleasure talking to you.
That's great. We're going to do a little series of videos together where I'm going to ask you some topics that have been on my mind and I think on the mind of a lot of people who work in the area of cybersecurity, kind of, developers, CISOs, DevOps, engineers, those kinds of
Mhm.
folks. The first thing I want to talk to you about scanning. It's on everybody's mind. People always worried about, how we scan for different types of issues, say misconfigurations in
Mhm.
in all sorts of different things, applications, code, endpoints, that kind of thing. But I think they miss infrastructure, and that's an area where you're really good. Talk to me a little bit about what you think people are missing when they're doing that type of scanning. Like what is the infrastructure focus that you see as sort of a gap?
Okay, well, let's start first in how people actually develop applications, and it is kind of at the core of the issue. So usually they use a lot of open source tools or proprietary tools that they can configure as third-party dependencies, right? So, and the reason is they don't want to reinvent the wheel, which also obviously makes sense. So they are scanning their code, but then the configurations and how it is deployed is often an afterthought. Nowadays, there's a lot of focus and a lot of tools out there that can ensure that your cloud is properly configured once you push it in. But all these little tools that are appearing as dependency, maybe as a container or a managed service, say Kafka, a MySQL, a Postgres, whatever you are using there, they are usually just left with some default configurations. And that is usually a very dangerous spot to be in. Frankly speaking, I personally blame sales because they were trying to make those tools as easy to deploy as possible for developers to be able to ramp up and use those tools quickly because their goal is adoption, right? So, and in the end, these tools remain default configured in the software stack because no one ever touches them after the system is running and functioning. And that is a lot. That is a lot of the root cause of data breaches and alike, where people are just missing certain areas where they should have hardened them.
Yeah, why do the traditional scanning tools miss this layer, this important infrastructure layer? Why are they missing that? What's the reason? Seems like that would be a place they would focus.
Well, the answer to that question is actually very multi-layered. So first of all, I mean, traditionally, people would have on-premise installations or data centers which were managed by IT teams, and then cloud came around and things became a little bit more automated. And then since 2015, an infrastructure as code paradigm came on, which allowed to codify these practices that were traditionally done by IT people. And obviously, developers are also not experts in IT works. Usually, they don't know much about networking. They don't know much about how to set up proper firewalls and all the controls that are natural to an IT person, right? So, how it came about then is then that we are only recently able to scan actually for this in an automated way within our infrastructure. And infrastructure as code, as much as it is already for 10 years around, is a little bit in its infancy still because it's mainly focused on the cloud layer and maybe some container provisioning layer, right? So it is now a natural spot to start scanning for those things, but the market wasn't ready about 10 years ago. But now we are, and we are able to get more deeply into it, and more deeper than we would ever have been able to do that before. Additionally, there's another item to it. It's like, how is software run today? Traditionally, if you look in the early 2000s, you would get a CD or a DVD or a USB drive. You run your software locally, and everything is right. But nowadays, usually running a software that is interconnected with some form of infrastructure, either for delivery or for running the software. So this puts the software into a totally different landscape than it was 20 years ago, and the needs for scanning have evolved based on this factor, if that makes sense.
So is the idea that if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing AppSec and vulnerability scanning, that kind of stuff, which most people are doing, would the idea be to run the infrastructure scanning next to that? Maybe you can say a couple of words about how you do it at CoGuard, but is
Yes.
the idea that you'd run this next to the other stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, that's that is the idea behind it. I mean, uh, let's say SaaS scanning has saved us over the years from the blue screens, right? Software became very stable. But when you look at the news, you cannot really say this about infrastructure. You have like a downtime or a breach that is reported every week. So the same diligence that we're putting towards code, we're not putting towards infrastructure, right? And what saved us in the code space will be able to also save us in the infrastructure space, namely to make sure that we do things as early as possible, detect misconfigurations as early as possible, so that the changes needed in order to make a system secure are not an afterthought and not expensive because the cost rises exponentially the later in the development you are and the more critical changes you need to make, right?
And you've built a tool now that does this.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
So
give us a couple of minutes about what it does.
well, when I started to be working and living in the DevOps space, I noticed that, okay, so, as a coder, I was used to these tools telling me when I'm wrong, and I like to be told when I'm wrong. So it would tell me in the code, even highlight the lines where things are maybe insecure or not good practice and things like this. When I was looking into the infrastructure as code space, I noticed, yeah, there is Terraform scanners, actually a lot of them, and a lot of like Kubernetes scanners, which touch the surface layer that is, I would say, low-hanging fruit because you can directly get those information pieces from from the API. But then I was like, okay, I was also tasked with setting up some lower level services, Kurento, Kafka, and things like this. And I was like, how do I know I'm doing this right? And with the thousands of different configuration parameters, which are also independent with one another, how do I actually verify that this is all right? This is not a human task, and this is ripe for human error. So I saw the need that there needs to be something that is much more encompassing for different toolings that can appear in an enterprise infrastructure, right? So, and this is where we started. We needed to have an engine which which models the infrastructure, models how they all pieces communicate with one another, and then checks obviously all individual configuration files for dangerous defaults, misconfigurations, anything that a developer may have put in for quick and easy fix purposes to just get a ticket done and items like that.
Well, I hope people watching will do two things. I hope they'll stick around for our full series of discussions. We're going to do a few more, but I also hope they'll be in touch with you. I think you got a nice tool, Albert. I hope that people watching will give it a spin. I think it'll help them reduce risk in their infrastructure, particularly if they're developers or engineers. So keep up the good work, Albert.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you on our next video. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.